Hey guys, it's James here with Forever Fresh, and today we're going to be doing a tutorial in Photoshop. A few people asked me on my last wallpaper video I did how I achieved the depth of field on the image. So I didn't do anything like using a depth pass or anything like that in Cinema 4D. What I did was just do it all in Photoshop. And this is something that I do quite a lot because it's really quick and you can get a really nice looking result. So I'm going to be showing you how to do it on the same image actually that I used. And then I'm going to be showing you another scenario in which this could be used that can achieve a really awesome looking effect. So we're going to have a look at that afterwards. So first of all, this was the original sort of state of the image. So as you can see, there's absolutely no depth of field. It's got the same sort of sharpness throughout the whole image. And if we then click over on here on this one, you'll see I've just color corrected it, and also if you look at the very top of the image, you can see we've got these brighter highlights and we've also got a really nice subtle blur. Now, it's not the most accurate sort of depth of field you can get. Obviously, doing the physical renderer or actually taking a physical photograph is a lot more accurate, but this is a really good way to add in afterwards, just to trick the eye a bit. So let's just grab these color corrections, and I'm just going to drag them over to my other image here, just so we're working with the same looking thing. Right, so let's get into the depth of field. So how it's done is using something called a quick mask. Now, we're going to be using the gradient tool for this, and once you've selected your gradient, if you don't know how to do that, where you've normally got the paint bucket, click and hold down, and then you'll get another tool that will pop up here, and that's the gradient, so you can release on that. And then we're going to want to select whatever the first one is, linear gradient. So we're going to just want to select our base layer. So if I double click it just so we unlock it and hit OK, well, that means we can now edit this layer. So what I'm going to do is hit Q on the keyboard. Now you'll notice if you've selected any colours on your gradient, this will go to black and white, so don't worry about that. If you hit Q again, it will go back to usual. Anyway, hitting Q, what it does is select this button just below where the colours are. I know you can't see this mouse, so it's a bit hard to explain, but basically it means we're not editing it in the standard mode, so we're using a quick mask. So if I click and drag, you'll see we get this red gradient. Now what this does if we hit Q again is create a selection. Now we don't want this part of the image selected. What we want to try and do is just select the area that we want to get blurred. So if I didn't want to do that, if I do control, let's just use the histogram. Right, so if I just make sure I've hit Q again, yep, there we go, and then drag down, just try and get a basic gradient from where we want our blur to be. So perhaps something like that. Let's just go a little bit more overboard so we can see what we're doing for this tutorial. So that should be good. If we then hit Q, we'll see we've made a selection of the bottom half of the image. So the next thing we want to do is hit Filter, go to blur, and then lens blur. Now this is basically going to overwrite your image, so I'd suggest perhaps making a duplicate of your base image just in case you mess something up and need to go back, but I've already got a save of this, so we're just going to leave it as it is for now. So if we hit yes to the blur, we've now got the blur on the wrong side of the image, so what we can do is just hit invert here, and now we've got it over at the top. Now we've got a lot of different parameters here that we can mess with. If we're using a depth map, we can put it in here, but I didn't render out a depth map. In hindsight, I probably should have, but oh well. Yeah, if you're using a depth map, you can just select your depth map here, and then you can blur it through that. But obviously, if you've used just the quick mask as we've done, you don't need to worry about that. Okay, so the other effects we've got here is under shape. We can either use a triangle, square, pentagon, hexagon, heptagon, or octagon. I tend to go for the pentagon just because I like the shape it creates. And then we've got the more fun stuff under here, which is stuff like the radius, which is basically the blur intensity. So if we just mess around with that a bit, let's just leave it fairly high. Blade curvature, which is more to do with cameras. You can't really tell that much of a difference on an image like this, so we'll leave that for now. And rotation again, you won't really be able to tell that much. You will be able to see if you've got any sort of, I think it's called bokeh. I can't remember how to pronounce it, but bokeh or bokeh. If you use the rotation, you'll see those sort of shapes rotating around. So you can just mess with that to basically get the shape and the rotation that you like. Now for the specular highlights, this is quite interesting as well. We've got an overall brightness here which we can drag up and down, but then the threshold is what really makes these highlights. So as you can see, if I drag it all the way down, we've just got this white out area, and if we drag it up a bit, it's a lot less subtle, which looks a lot better, I reckon. So let's leave it around something like that. Just push the brightness up slightly, and that's looking quite good. Now we've also got a noise type. I tend to put this on about 2. I quite like seeing a little bit of grain in the image. It gives a bit of a cinematic feel, I guess. So somewhere between 1 and 2 tends to look good, I reckon. So I'm going to leave it on 2 for this. And distribution, you can either go uniform or Gaussian. I normally just leave it on Gaussian. And also you've got monochromatic, which is if you're using the noise. If you've got monochromatic ticked, the noise will be in black and white. If you've got it unchecked, it will be color noise. So we're just going to leave it black and white now and hit OK. And that's pretty much the effect done. So that's kind of how I do the depth of field in Cinema 4D. Now one other thing I thought I'd show you, which is pretty cool, I did a big photography project on this a year or so ago, is something called the Toy Town effect, which is this effect you're seeing here. There are ways to do it with an actual camera. You need a swing tilt, I think it's called, or shift tilt lens. Which basically will create 2 sort of depth of field areas on your lens. They're really expensive though, so I opted for the Photoshop option on this one. And this is kind of how I discovered this kind of effect, how to do it. So I'll just show you how I did it on this image. It's pretty much the same thing, but we're just using a different type of gradient. So again, selecting my gradient, instead of using the linear gradient, I'm going to use the reflected gradient, which is going to basically create 2 areas instead of 1. So if I just click and drag, let's get it somewhere in the center, somewhere about like that, maybe a little bit smaller. Up a bit, can mess around for ages doing this, that will do. So I'm going to hit Q again. So we've got 2 selections now. I'm just going to go to filter, blur, and then lens blur once again. And again I'm going to invert it. And then we just need to mess about with this threshold. So that needs to go up a bit. Comes all the way to the top for this one. Let's just drag it down to 253. And we can actually just adjust the brightness so it's not quite so in your face. So something like that's looking pretty cool, I reckon. Let's just push that up to 254. Yeah, that's looking better. And then the radius is a little too strong. But you'll see the sort of effect that we've got here is it kind of looks like a toy town. This isn't the greatest image to do it with. It works best if you've got an image that's sort of shot at a kind of 45-degree angle looking down on a city or a village or whatever, but you can create this easy to do effect pretty simply in Photoshop. So it saves you having to buy, you know, a massively expensive lens for your camera to get this effect with. So I hope you have fun with it, guys. Just a little tip there for you to try out in Photoshop. Hope you found it useful. If you did, remember to leave the video a like, and I'll be doing a few more quick tips and a few longer tutorials very shortly, so stick around for those.